The thing that most people wanted to know about was the decision to kill Cranston. Was that always, he was always going down?
I don't want to sound like annoying or facetious or anything, but the way it works is the decision was to kill
Brody.
Joe Brody, the character in the movie. And then it's like, who's going to play him? And you look around and you know what? But Ryan's a very good actor. And you go, we'd be blessed if he did it. And I'll be honest with you, we tried versions where he survived, like in terms of the screenplay. And the thing is, everyone that did that, there's nothing left for that character to do. And without it being silly, and it turns into, if he sticks with Ford, it becomes Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. And the tone of the movie becomes fun, but not the tone we were trying to do. And if he sticks with the military guys, he's like a fifth wheel, and he's, you know, and it just was like his job was done in the storyline there. And retrospectively, you know, when you get to see the movie, I understand, and I wish we maybe had figured a way to make it work, but we tried everything, and we had all ideas welcome. You know, I mean, even with Brian, it was like, but it was just as a story beat, he becomes redundant once he's handing over the baton to the rest of the cast.
I actually agree with you, and also it creates that kind of tension and the stakes early on, which I think you kind of have to have.
Also wanted people to think, oh, they're willing to do that. Oh, okay, maybe this ain't going to end how I think, you know. And so it throws people a bit, and I like that in movies where you stop thinking that they're going to do everything you can predict.
Talking about script fluctuations, not that was necessarily a fluctuation, that was just a consideration. What other things did you consider bending? Because there seem to be key set pieces. Were those always there, or did some arrive midway through the process?
Well, what happens is everything's happening in parallel. So you're working on the screenplay whilst you're building sets, whilst you're casting the movie, whilst you're doing previs and animation and all sorts of things. And so the thing that was like set in stone for me, like the aspects that were never going to change really, were like the major set pieces. And so that's what got all my attention in a lot of the pre-production, knowing that the rest we could get right as we went along. And so they were kind of like the milestones of the movie that we knew we were going to reach at some point. And it was just how the connective tissue between them was going to work sometimes. And that's what got refined and changed as we sort of evolved the film, as we sort of made it. Because it is true, you do write the movie, and then you film it and rewrite it, and then you edit it and rewrite it again. And there was a lot of, if you could just teleport the movie back in time to before you started, it'd be so much easier, because you go, oh, that's it, of course, right, okay, I know how to do it. And
in terms of the Mothra reference, which we see on the side of, I don't know the term for it,
it's actually terrarium.
That's
but
the
it's
word.
Yeah.
That seems to me to be the one clear Easter egg in the whole film. Were there others that we didn't spot?
Oh yeah, there was. Okay, I mean, so there was that. When he's a kid and he goes out of his bedroom, the camera goes up to a poster. On the poster, in Japanese, because obviously we all know Japanese, the title of that film is called Let Them Fight. And if you look on the images, it's Mutos and a nuclear reactor and the Golden Gate Bridge. So kind of the movie's represented on that poster. And if you, in the classroom, although this is probably more obvious, but when there's the power cut, they're watching a thing about how a cocoon hatches on the TV that cuts off. And on the walls is like the life cycle of butterflies and things. And at the end of the movie, when he gets on the boat in San Francisco, and the boat is called Go Whales Tours, and the Japanese word for Godzilla is Gojira. So it's kind of like, and Jira means whale. So it's like the Japanese, it's like saying Godzilla Tours on the boat. Silly things like that.
That's awesome. Because when I did the trailer breakdown with you, I was like, so you put in a little peace crane dangling from the window in the classroom, and I thought I was so clever, and I don't spot any of those other ones.
It was one of those things where they were there like origami, just out of a nice detail that the art department put in. And then once I saw them, I was like, you know what we should have done? They should have been Muto up there. Like subconsciously, it would have been good. And I kept asking the visual effects people, like, could you change one of them to a Muto? But and there was this polite, like, we'll see if we get time. But we have more important things to do, like all the visual effects for the movie.
Yeah, Godzilla. That's one we have to do.
You ended up with 1,000 or so effect shots. Do you know the exact number in the end?
I don't know, something like 990. I don't know.
It's a healthy number.
Yeah.
Yeah, but actually, you know what? A lot of these films, the thing I'm most proud of is a lot of these films, this kind of film has closer to 2,000, and we actually have a lot, like nearly half what these movies normally have. And I was kind of like, when they said that, when they did the shot count, I was saying to the visual effects producer and stuff like, see what you're worried about, it's going to be okay. And they were like, yeah, but Gareth, your shots are over twice as long as the average shot, which makes it even harder. And it was like, oh, okay.
What about the decision to do San Francisco? Because that is a city that has suffered from monsters attacks on film quite a lot. Was that sort of part of the appeal of it, that it's kind of part of a tradition of suffering?
I think with the exception of I think a lot of cities have had their fair share of something in movies, apart from like Nuneaton, but that, I don't think that...
Stale come.
I mean, no, that's my hometown, but I don't think that would have really gone down well with the studio. But basically it was because if you imagine, okay, let's for argument's sake, it's Los Angeles. It had to be somewhere on the American Pacific coastline. So let's pick Los Angeles. Like, you step out, you Godzilla, you step out of the ocean, it's already flat. You know what I mean? There's nothing to do. It's like his job is done already for him. It's a very boring movie. And so you're looking for a city that's got landmarks, that has a very good relation geographically with the ocean relationship. So you have the bridges, you have the bay. It just became like, it just wrote itself, really. There was, you could have gone to Seattle, you could have done San Diego. But to be honest, you show that skyline, and this is the problem you get stuck in. You show that skyline to people and they don't know where that is. Mm. But it is like, I know it sounds silly, and you do think about this, and I actually did. You feel like, okay, why do we do this? Why do we always have like major cities at the end of these sort of movies? Why? And just to sound serious for a minute, it is like, if you've ever gone round England and gone for little walks in the countryside, and there's these castles, on the hilltops. And I used to always think, this is silly. When you invade a country, right, what would happen is everyone would retreat to the castle and get ready to fire arrows. And you feel like you could just, back then, you could have just invaded England and gone, and everyone would have ran back to their castle. You could be like, you could have your castle, all right? We'll take the 99% rest of the land, and you all stay in your castle. Like, it's kind of a really silly thing. But then what's even sillier is that the invading forces were like, we're only interested in the castle. Like, if you take the castle, you've taken the country. And I think cities are our modern castles. There's this feeling, like, from humanity's point of view, that until you take the highest landmark, you haven't actually won. And I think that's why a lot of films climax at it, like in the center of a major metropolis.
Can we just talk briefly about Atomic Breath? Because one of my favorite, like, money shots, as they're called, was Godzilla pulling the jaws apart.
Yeah.
And essentially firing down his neck.
Yeah.
That was an outstanding shot. What were your requirements from Atomic Breath? Were you very keen for it to be that specific neon colour?
I mean, it was always going to be blue. At one point we dabbled with lightning, like a little bit more to do with nature, in terms of godlike destruction. But it was considered not enough like Godzilla, classic Godzilla. And that moment, actually, like we were like, how are we going to kill the Muto? How are we going to do this? And we knew Godzilla was going to come back and do it. And it was a last minute kind of decision. It was like, well, what if he just pulls apart? Because there was this moment where we're going to just break the jaw and do this. And it felt like that's too much like King Kong. And so then it was like, well, what if he just vomits blue breath, right? Like nearly a kiss, you know what I mean? Like the Muto is going to grab him. And I honestly kind of thought, we're not going to get away with this. This is absurd. And then we sat and we did a little test screening, and it was everybody's favourite moment.
I didn't think it was absurd at all. I thought it was like pure violence. It was the most brutal thing you could possibly do.
I thought there was cheering in the cinema when I saw it. So yeah. What about the decision, which also got a cheer, to ravage Las Vegas?
Well, we were already in Nevada because of the nuclear Yucca Mountain, where they store all their nuclear, which is a real place, all the nuclear waste in America. obviously not being American, I didn't know about this, but it's like a contentious issue in the States, is this Yucca Mountain thing in Nevada that's just full of nuclear waste. And so the nearest city, you know, because we're talking castles again, was Las Vegas, really. And so I couldn't resist it, because the way they do all the casinos with the, you know, the Paris and New York, it's like a one-stop shop for monsters. Like, you can smash every major landmark in the world in like one go. And so it was too good to be true. And that sequence actually a lot longer initially. We planned quite a few shots. And then when you watch the movie, as fun as everything is individually, when you watch it, you kind of need to keep getting on with the story. And so some stuff got cut out, which is why in the trailer there's that shot of the Statue of Liberty. There was a sequence that sort of ended with that shot. And as we were cutting the film, you know, it was just decided that we should end it sooner.
One of my favourite conceits within the film is the grand conceit that it's soaking up radiation. Was that from the naissance, or did that occur halfway through as well? Because the idea of feeding off it, and also the courting lovers giving each other a gift of the missile, that, for example, in particular, was that something that came in late after the radiation idea?
The feeding on it was always part of it, because it feels like, you know, you get very symbolic when you do a monster movie and very metaphorical, and you're always looking for that stuff, because the reality is, like, a giant monster movie is just absurd, and it's not going to happen, and we don't have to worry about things like that. It has no point on society. But so you're trying to find what's the hidden meaning and what they represent, and so the nuclear theme is, you know, comes given with Godzilla. And what's great, I liked about where it ended up landing, was that, you know, we police the world in the West and we say you can't have nuclear power and you can't have nuclear weapons, but we can. And the idea, if there were these creatures that were attracted to radiation, like the tables would be turned and we'd be desperately trying to get rid of this stuff. And that sequence actually where they give each other it's a dowry or whatever it is, a gift, did come in post-production. That it was storyboarded, not specifically that, but a moment where they met was storyboarded, and then we decided it was too expensive and maybe we should just avoid it. And then when we watched it, we missed it. So it was all done in the computer.
The faces light up in that beam.
Yeah. There's a little bit of either Battlestar Galactica going on with the Cylons, or maybe Knight Rider.
I wanted to ask about two people who I know kind of, you mentioned to Ardan were involved in the film, Andy Serkis and Frank Darabont. Can you tell us what they brought to it?
Yeah. So Andy Serkis, you know, we called him very late in the day. We were towards the end of post-production, and we were doing all the animation. MPC did all, you know, pretty much all the Godzilla shots in the movie, and there's a lot of limited time to get everything right, and hand animation, which is exactly what we did, is a slow process to kind of do back and forth reiterations. It's like it takes at least a day, if not longer, to sort of animate something well. And so using a real actor and having a conversation with that actor and them doing the performance and saying, just copy that, that's what we'd like to do, was like a fast way to reach a solution. And so Andy came in just for a couple of weeks and performed some, you know, just a handful of the key soulful Godzilla moments, like when he fell and looks at Ford and things like that, so that we could use the same eye movement and, you know, the little eye darts and stuff to try and give it some soul. And Frank Darabont, he came in and he did a pass of the screenplay about 3 months before we started filming. And, you know, there's a lot of his works remained in the film, but the thing that really stayed, that is what he brought to the table, that is, you know, one of the highlights of the film, is when the doors close on Juliette Binoche. That whole idea of there being like a gateway or a checkpoint that they have to get through, and that would close, and then you would see her die, and you'd have that very emotional moment. And that was like his the biggest contribution, and it's one of the most, it's the emotional, you know, peak of the film potentially. And so I mean, that's why he's Frank Darabont, I think.
Yeah, I bet that it was the bridge sequence, and I got it wrong. Anyway, thank you so much. That's been really illuminating.
Thanks a lot.